English, math and science, but if we fail to give them a direction in life, a purpose, a vision, and a set of values that they are not going to compromise on, if we do not do these things, then their education might not be as useful. I want to very quickly touch upon 2 points. One is Swamiji's impact in my life. And second, what my understanding of Swamiji's expectation from us today through our education is, and what we can do in 75th year of our independence as the entire nation celebrates it. In my life, I was named after Swami Vivekananda because my father was a devotee. He would go to Ramakrishna Mission Ashram Library in Patna. And while studying at the library one day, it's a funny story, but it is true, he decided that one day he wanted to be a monk. He wanted to be like Swamiji's at the Ramakrishna Mission. If his family sent him into worldly life, he would name his children after Swamiji and teach them through Ramakrishna Vivekananda literature. So my elder brother was named Vivek Sagar. Sagar came from Ishwarchand Vidya Sagar, Vivek from Swami Vivekananda, and Vasant because he was born in Vasant Ritu. My name I don't need to explain, Sharad Vivek Sagar. Now, when we were kids, we lived in small towns and villages of India, small towns and villages of Bihar. We were never told, that there are these challenges, these problems, these obstacles, that these are small towns and villages. We were given 3 very simple tasks. The first task was, we were very small kids. Our parents would take us to the local private ashram then, the Adbhutananda ashram in those days. Later it became Sri Ramakrishna Mission Ashram Chhapra. Our parents would take us to the ashram. But the 3 ways in which they taught us. The first one was, they put teachings and quotations in English and in Hindi of Holy Mother, Ma Sharada Devi, of Sri Ramakrishna Dev and Swami Vivekananda on every wall of our house. And every morning when we woke up as kids, first thing we had to do was, we had to go running around the house, read every quotation aloud, and then get back and start doing anything else. The second thing that they did was, they made it mandatory for us to read newspapers every single day. English and Hindi newspapers, we had to read every day. And the third thing was, they would bring textbook and notebooks and they would ask us to study at home. For the first 12 years of my life, I had no regular schooling. It was only when I turned 12 that we moved to the capital city of Bihar, the city of Patna, with my mother, and that is where we started going to school. 3 years ago, one Swamiji asked me a wonderful question. He asked me that you oftentimes say that when you were a kid, you would read Swamiji's books or Swamiji's quotations. What was your understanding of Swamiji when you were a child? And by God's grace, I think my answer was clear in my mind. And I said, when I was a child, Swamiji was for me a superhero. We did not have television at house, no comics books to read, nothing like that. So Swamiji for me was a superhero. Now many young friends in the audience can wonder, why Swamiji is a superhero? Because you see all your superhero movies and comics and anything that you watch or read, superheroes do something that nobody else is able to even think of or execute. In India, pre-independence, it is fitting that in 6 days' time we will be celebrating our 75th Independence Day. But in India that was under British rule, and India that had been attacked and invaded for hundreds of years, people in India had forgotten their own values, their own power, their own faith in themselves. In all of darkness, Swamiji radiated like a light. And that light illuminated not just our own country, but people around the world. It was a light that Swamiji carried with himself to Chicago. It was a light that spread across the world with the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna Dev and Swami Vivekananda. As we look at Swamiji's life, as young students, I am sure on 11th of September, you all hear about Chicago Address, you all hear about Swamiji's journey to Chicago and the glory that he brought for India, for our people, for our culture and civilization on the 11th of September. But Swamiji's own life was full of challenges, was full of obstacles. Our national life was lost amidst confusion and puzzle, and it was lost in a lot of negativity. Very few thought that we could gain our independence. Very few had that faith that an Indian could be good at science, an Indian could be good at literature, an Indian culture mattered, or an Indian could take pride in his or her own civilization. And you see stories that Swamiji tells. In fact, when I was in grade 9, I was selected to go to Japan to represent India. I was one of 9 boys and 9 girls in our country to be sent to Japan to go and learn from Japan what they did. There were 2 things that I did in Japan. First one, I got very excited because Swamiji used to say that every young citizen of India should look at Japan one time and learn from the country. So I have had the fortune to travel to many countries across the world, but Japan was the first one, so I take pride in that. The second thing was, my father from Ramakrishna Mission Library in Patna had brought a student's pack of Swamiji's books. So I used to write emails, no FaceTime, no video calling in those days. So every evening I would write an email back to my father saying what is happening in Japan. And at his bank system, he used to work for the State Bank, and he could check his emails there. So on the 4th or 5th day, my father writes an email to me saying, the books that you are carrying with yourself, you gift it to the Japanese family that will host you for 2 days. Because the government wanted to keep us in Tokyo for a few days, in Hiroshima for a few days, and at a Japanese family for 2 days, so that we understood their culture and their people. So the day my father sent that email, I was reading it 4 or 5 years ago, and I was very happy seeing it. I write back to my father saying, the moment I arrived in the Japanese family's house, they gave me a few things, a Japanese fan, a kimono to put on for the evening tea. I rushed, I took out the Swami Vivekananda student pack and I gave it to the Japanese family for them to read. So eventually, somewhere in my mind, in my life, what I took most pride in was Swamiji. That you reach Japan and the Japanese are giving you a fan, they are giving you a kimono, and you are getting a tour of the bullet train and how Hiroshima was rebuilt and how wonderful Tokyo is. The most wonderful thing I knew I could give them was a book by Swamiji. So that is the depth to which I saw Swamiji as a superhero. But seeing Swamiji as a superhero alone is not enough. There is a task that Swamiji left behind for our people. There is a vision that he gave forward for our country and for the world. And that vision cannot be completed without education that is true in nature. I was speaking at a teacher's workshop 2 days back, and I had the honor of repeating something that Swamiji outlines. That no one can teach you. A teacher cannot come and teach you. A teacher can come and activate the teacher within you. We are all learners. The great Sri Ramakrishna, whose teachings inspire the world today, he saw himself as a lifelong learner. And Swamiji quotes that again and again. The organization that I run, called Dexterity Global, that identifies and trains young people from different parts of our country to be nation builders, to be local role models, to be servant leaders, to use their education to be useful to the society. There are 2 things we tell each one of our kids the day they come in. We say, you have to be lifelong learners and you have to be lifelong leaders. That idea is not something that we invented. These come from the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. This comes from the message that Swamiji had for young people like us. Now there is something very simple that as young students many of you can keep in mind. At Dexterity, when we translate some of our ideas into Hindi, we say, Siksha se sakshamata. From education, let's build ability, let's build capability. And sakshamata se seva. Once you've built some ability, use that to be useful to the society. Service through that. So for that reason, in 2008, when Dexterity was founded, as I mentioned, I had the honor of representing India in Japan, in a few other countries, and in high school, I got to travel to national and international competitions. When I used to go to these competitions, I used to see that there were very few kids from remote towns and villages of India who were representing India at these platforms. And many times the conversation was about, illiteracy, poverty, development, access to clean drinking water. And I wondered that while it is amazing that a child from, a Dhirubhai Ambani school or a Doon school is representing India, who has done, his or her research, who has put in a lot of work to try and understand what poverty looks like, what access to drinking water can mean to a family. How wonderful it would be if a child who has seen her mother go 1.5 kilometers to fetch a bucket of water, if that child spoke at a global platform, her experiences, Her ideas, her thought, her presence would be more inspiring and enriching than many students who have done all their research sitting in some other part of the country. So in 2008, Dexterity was founded with two goals. The first goal was, our children are bright, they are wonderful, they are hardworking, they love their families, they love this country. But many times, they do not know that there are opportunities that exist specially for them. Competitions and conferences, scholarships and workshops that our students can benefit from. So, in 2008, the first thing we did was, we built something called Dex Connect. Dex Connect essentially means any opportunity in the world, a scholarship, competition, conference, workshop that is designed specially for our children. They should be the first ones to know about it. Not just that, along with those opportunities, 2 preparation material for every opportunity is provided. Dex Connect is free for every child in the country, and so far close to 6-7 million children receive it. But Dex Connect as a platform alone is not good enough. As young students, as parents, as teachers, we need to be aware about these opportunities. We need to know that we have to continuously seek what we can use as a platform to grow, use as a platform to learn, use as a platform to refine ourselves. The second thing we decided to do was, I could go to these global platforms and complain that no child from a small village is at a platform, no child from a small town is at this global platform. Or the other option was going to small towns and villages of our country, identifying, grooming and training next generation leaders. For last 14 years, that is exactly what we've been doing. And so far our kids have received over 113 crores in scholarships from top institutions across the world. But they do not receive these scholarships or go to top institutions to just get a good pay package, buy a house or buy a car. They do it with a very foundational vision that there was a generation in this country, and this is where Swamiji's purpose of education comes to life. There was a generation in this country that got us freedom. Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, B.R. Ambedkar, and you look at their journey. They were all inspired by teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Many of you know what they said. You look at what they did in their individual lives. As young students, many times we forget, or we are never told, what Mahatma Gandhi was doing when he was at our age, what Patel was doing when he was in his teens and 20s, what Ambedkar or Nehru were doing when they were at your age. Mahatma Gandhi was studying at a place called University College in London. B.R. Ambedkar went on a scholarship to study at Columbia University. Sardar Patel went to Middle Temple College in the UK, and Nehru studied at Cambridge. They used their education to open their perspectives and worldview. They used their education to get the skills of reading, writing, arithmetic, critical thinking, research, whatever it may be. Then all of them, each one of them, traveled the length and breadth of this country, communicated with people, understood what fundamentally lied at the soul of India. And in this journey, each one of them comments on Swamiji and how his journeys, his experiences, his message had built a foundational impact in their journey to nationhood for India one more time. And for that reason, it is important to learn from that generation. It was not, when we talk about Gandhi, we are reminded of a walking stick. When we talk about Nehru, we are reminded of a rose that he would carry. When we talk about B.R. Ambedkar, we think it was a poor kid who gave to the country a constitution. When we think about Sardar Patel, we think about iron. We need to think about that fundamental journey of Siksha, Seva and Samvad. That Samvad that needs to happen with the neighbor, with people down the street, with people who we meet in airplanes and trains and buses. That Samvad is important. As young people, talk. Talk to your grandmother. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to staff. Talk to drivers. Talk to people who you meet. They will give you experiences and stories that will be fundamental and foundational in thinking deeper, gaining more insights. Then Seva. That has to be the goal of your education. Swamiji talks about dasasya dasa, servant leaders. This is who these people went on to be. Trust me, that generation of people at University College London had a lot of people, and it had one Mahatma Gandhi. That generation at Middle Temple had a lot of people, and it had one Sardar Patel. That generation of students at Columbia had a lot of people, and yet one Ambedkar. The difference is their education was for a larger purpose than just pay packages. Their education was something for a larger purpose than just research papers. They were inspired by the call of a patriot monk. They were inspired by that call for freedom, that goal of nation building. And that is what each generation needs to do. That generation got us freedom and we consider them important. When we got independence, then that generation of nation builders, servant leaders comes into play again. A young student returns from University of Cambridge in 1948 and meets with the Prime Minister of India and says that India can also build a space program. That space should not be the frontier only of Soviet Russia or the United States. And one young Vikram Sarabhai builds India's space program to this degree that for an amount that Hollywood makes movies on space, we launch space shuttles in space for an amount 1/4 of that price, 1/4 of that cost. When we look at people like Verghese Kurian and Tribhuvan Das Patel, in 1948, in our country, I know it is unimaginable for many of us, but in 1948 we did not have enough milk to feed our growing population. And yet a young man returns from Michigan State University, goes to the sleepy town of Anand in Gujarat, meets with a gentleman named Tribhuvan Das Patel, and they get to work. Amul is founded in Gujarat, and in 1998, India becomes the largest producer of milk in the world, overtaking the same United States that Verghese Kurian left and returned from. That was the vision and purpose of Tribhuvan Das Patel and Verghese Kurian. In our country, when Swamiji says education alone is the solution to our problems, in one part of our country, a fisherman who was a true patriot raises a child in his family amidst poverty, but gives to him the values that would take that person forward from being a young student Kalam to Dr. Kalam to President Kalam, and give us not just internal security from ISRO and DRDO, but a high moral standard of statesmanship from Rashtrapati Bhavan at Rayasena Hills. This is what foundational role our education must play in our nation building. This is the foundational role that education must play in ensuring that the English you know should be useful for somebody. The mathematical equations you work on should lift more people up. The scientific calculations and reactions that you've been taught shall make lives better for people who are living in misery or in poverty or in ignorance. And that is Swamiji's work that we must do in our times. Everything that we know, we must put it to use. And that is why at Dexterity, we've given a very simple definition of leadership to our young people. We say leadership is your ability to deliver value through whatever limited expertise you have. That means you don't need to become the Prime Minister or the President, the director of a program or the collector of a district in order to become a leader. You can be a leader if whatever you know, you put it to use. That essentially means a 5-year-old child in a family who helps a 2-year-old child or a 3-year-old child walk, that child is a leader. Because a 5-year-old child knows only how to walk and is helping somebody who does not know how to walk with him or with her. That child is a leader. A 15-year-old child somewhere in our country who does not know, a lot of math or science but knows decent Telugu or English or Hindi and helps an old grandmother write a letter to get a widow pension card. That child is a leader because the ability is writing, and that child is putting that writing to use for somebody who needs it. These are children who, if they grow up with these values, who, if they grow up with this message, if they make Swamiji's call their call, if they hope to lift this country up through their lives, their education and their service. These are kids who at 5 who are helping others walk, who at 15 are writing a letter for somebody else, at 30 and 45 and 60 and even 90. They will be lamps that will illumine more lives. They will be people who lift more people up. And that is the reason why the idea of education does not need to come from career counselors. It does not need to come from, some other part of the world or a quotation put somewhere. It needs to come from within. That connection we feel with our great nation. And if we want to feel that connection, I know not all of us can, be in the palace of Khetri one day and in Belagaon the other day and, in Gujarat the other day as Swamiji could in 39 years. He could write, he could lecture, he could travel, he could lift more people up, he could change lives, he could do all of that in 39 years. Now if everybody started doing that, it would be a huge pressure on our airlines and railway companies and trains and everyone. So what can we do? In 39 years, Swamiji has given his life to us, his message to us, and his call to us. We can read Swami Vivekananda, and our understanding of education, our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of that purpose in life will become clearer. Our convictions will become deeper. And in those moments when because of challenges we might feel bogged down, our faith in ourselves will become stronger when we have faith in Swamiji, when we have faith in Sri Ramakrishna Dev, in Holy Mother. When we have that deep faith, our deep sympathy for the society will increase, because it is only the strong who can hope to give and lift more people up. If you feel you are weak, your chances of lifting somebody who's weak goes down. You'll make that person also feel weaker. If you think you are in misery, you'll make somebody else feel more miserable as well. So you have to have that fiery faith as Swamiji talks about it. Fiery sympathy as Swamiji talks about it. Let's have that fiery faith in ourselves, that faith in our education, that faith in our abilities, so that just like a generation that inspired by Swami Vivekananda walked us to freedom, a generation right around freedom walked us to a strong space program, a green revolution for grains, a white revolution for milk production. Just like that, we need a new generation of servant leaders. A generation that will lift more people up through its education in medicine and engineering, through its work in journalism and writing, through its work in art and culture, through its work every day in the society, as a son or a daughter, as a husband or a wife, as a citizen somewhere in some part of our country. Let Swamiji's call be your call. May Swamiji bless us all. Thank you very much. My pranam.